Silence is a force often underestimated, yet it carries a weight far greater than words. It is not just an absence of speech. It is a deliberate act, a conscious choice that can shake the very foundation of those who expect a reaction in moments of conflict when emotions run high and words become weapons. Silence stands as the ultimate defense. It does not engage, does not justify, does not fall into the trap of endless debates that serve no purpose but to inflate egos and feed negativity. It is the restraint that holds power, the space where true strength is revealed. People often mistake silence for weakness, assuming that a lack of response is an inability to speak, an admission of defeat. But the truth is, silence is not a sign of surrender. It is a sign of control. It is a choice made by those who understand that not every battle is worth fighting. Not every provocation deserves acknowledgement. The ability to remain silent when provoked, to withhold words when emotions demand an outburst, is a testament to inner discipline. It unsettles those who expect retaliation, who thrive on the chaos of conflict, who seek to manipulate through words. The power of silence lies in what it denies. It denies validation to those who seek it, denies fuel to the fire of argument, denies satisfaction to those who hope for a reaction. When confronted with hostility, responding in kind only perpetuates the cycle, giving the other person exactly what they want: attention, engagement, and an opportunity to assert dominance. But when silence is chosen instead, the cycle is broken. The aggressor is left with their own words, forced to hear their own echoes, to sit in the discomfort of an unreturned attack. Silence is not passive, it is an active form of resistance. It communicates in ways that words cannot. It signals self-assurance, a refusal to be swayed by external forces, a confidence that does not require validation. It shifts the balance of power, placing control in the hands of the one who chooses when and how to engage. There is no greater frustration for someone seeking a reaction than to be met with indifference. They push, they provoke, they attempt to stir emotions, only to be faced with an unyielding silence that speaks louder than any words ever could. In relationships, whether personal or professional, silence can serve as a boundary. It is a way of saying, I will not engage on your terms. It denies toxic individuals the drama they crave, leaving them to confront their own behavior. It is a reminder that not every argument needs a participant, not every insult needs a response. The ability to remain silent in the face of provocation is a reflection of self-respect, an acknowledgement that energy is best spent elsewhere. There is an undeniable psychological impact when words are met with silence. Human nature craves resolution, an answer, a reaction. When someone speaks with the intent to provoke and receives none, they are left unsettled, questioning their own words, their own importance in the moment. Silence forces introspection, often revealing more about the person speaking than about the one choosing not to respond. It is in the spaces between words that truth is often found, in the quiet that real understanding begins to form. Mastering silence is an art, one that requires patience and control. It is easy to speak in anger, to defend oneself in the face of criticism, to engage in debates that lead nowhere. But it takes true strength to hold one's tongue, to let silence do the talking. It is not about avoiding confrontation, but about choosing battles wisely. About understanding that not all conflicts deserve attention. The power of silence lies in its ability to dismantle without action, to disarm without force, to destroy without uttering a single word. Egos are fueled by attention, by validation, by the acknowledgement that they exist and hold significance in the eyes of others. The moment an ego is engaged, whether through praise or conflict, it is strengthened, fed by the energy it receives. People who thrive on their ego crave reactions, whether positive or negative, because reactions confirm their importance. The more they are noticed, the more power they feel they hold. They seek recognition, dominance, and control over how others perceive them. When their words or actions provoke a response, they interpret it as proof of their influence, believing that they have the ability to dictate emotions and manipulate outcomes. For those with inflated egos, attention is not just a desire, but a necessity. They feed off admiration, constantly seeking affirmation of their superiority. If admiration is not given willingly, they will resort to provocation, triggering emotions that elicit a response, whether it be anger, frustration, or defensiveness. Conflict to them is just as valuable as praise because it still places them at the center of someone else's focus. Even negative attention reinforces their sense of significance, confirming that their presence has an impact. When people react emotionally, they give the ego exactly what it seeks: proof that it matters, proof that it has power. The cycle of ego-driven interactions is difficult to break because it operates on a fundamental psychological principle. The more energy given to something, the more it grows. When people engage with an ego, whether by arguing, defending, or even trying to reason, they are inadvertently reinforcing it. Attempts to challenge or correct someone with an inflated ego often backfire, as they take any response as justification for their actions. They will twist words, manipulate narratives, and escalate situations just to keep the engagement going, thriving on the emotions they provoke. As long as they can keep someone responding, they maintain control over the interaction, dictating the direction and pace of the exchange. The greatest threat to an ego is indifference. Nothing unsettles an ego-driven person more than being ignored, than having their attempts at provocation met with silence. When someone refuses to engage, to react, to validate their presence, the ego is left in a state of uncertainty. Without a response to feed on, it begins to weaken, to question its own significance. The person behind the ego may try harder, increasing their efforts to provoke, but if met with continued silence, they will eventually exhaust themselves. Their power comes from the attention they receive, and when that attention is withdrawn, their sense of control diminishes. People with fragile egos often struggle with self-worth, relying on external validation to feel important. They build their identity around how others perceive them, constantly seeking reassurance that they are superior, influential, or respected. This need for validation makes them dependent on the reactions of those around them. The moment people stop reacting, the ego is forced to confront itself, to face the emptiness that was previously masked by attention. It is in this silence that the illusion of control begins to break down, revealing the insecurity that lies beneath the surface. Refusing to feed an ego is not an act of weakness, but of power. It is a deliberate choice to break free from the cycle of validation and control, to remove oneself from the game that ego-driven individuals play. It is a way of reclaiming energy, redirecting focus away from those who seek to manipulate and towards something more meaningful. When an ego is deprived of attention, it loses its influence, its ability to dictate emotions, its grip on those who once unknowingly fueled it. The moment the reaction stops, the ego begins to starve, left to face its own reflection without the comfort of external validation. Reacting to someone who seeks control through provocation gives them exactly what they want: a sense of power over your emotions, your thoughts, and your actions. The moment you respond in frustration, anger, or defense, you confirm to them that they have the ability to influence you, that their words or actions hold significance in your mind. This validation strengthens their ego, reinforcing their belief that they can manipulate situations to their advantage. This validation strengthens their ego, reinforcing their belief that they can manipulate situations to their advantage. It does not matter whether the reaction is positive or negative. What matters is that there is a reaction at all. They measure their power by the effect they have on others, by how much space they occupy in someone else's mental and emotional world. Every response, no matter how justified, fuels their confidence and reinforces their tactics. If they know they can push a certain button and get a predictable reaction, they will continue pressing it. The more emotional the response, the more satisfaction they derive from it. They may escalate their words, twist narratives, or create conflict where none existed before, all to ensure that they remain the focal point of the interaction. They thrive on the attention they receive, whether through admiration, fear, or anger. The reaction becomes a form of energy transfer, where they drain others while feeding their own sense of control. When someone reacts impulsively, they give up control over themselves and hand it over to the other person. Instead of choosing their own responses with intention, they become reactive, allowing emotions to dictate their behavior. The person provoking them now controls the rhythm of the conversation, the tone of the exchange, and the emotional atmosphere surrounding it. Once they realize they can manipulate emotions at will, they continue to do so, knowing that as long as they provoke a reaction, they maintain power. This is why arguments with manipulative individuals rarely lead to resolution. The goal is not understanding or compromise, but domination of the emotional space. People who seek control through provocation often use subtle psychological tactics to trigger reactions. They may gaslight, making others question their own perceptions. They may shift blame, turning attention away from their own faults. They may use passive-aggressive comments, pushing someone just enough to evoke a response without appearing outwardly. If the person being provoked reacts emotionally, they fall into the trap set for them, giving the instigator an excuse to claim innocence while portraying their target as unreasonable or overly sensitive. The more someone reacts, the more credibility the manipulator gains in justifying their behavior. Silence and non-engagement remove this power. When provocation is met with indifference, the cycle is disrupted. The person attempting to provoke is left without the fuel they need to continue. Instead of gaining control, they experience frustration, uncertainty, and even self-doubt. If they cannot elicit a reaction, they begin to question their own effectiveness. They may try harder, pushing boundaries further, but when there is no engagement, their influence begins to wane. Eventually, without the reinforcement of attention, their power diminishes, and they're forced to either change their approach or move on in search of someone else willing to provide the reaction they crave. Maintaining control over one's own reactions is a form of emotional discipline. It is not about suppressing emotions, but about choosing when and how to express them. It is about understanding that not every statement deserves a response. Not every argument needs participation, and not every provocation warrants engagement. The ability to remain composed in the face of manipulation is a sign of true power. It shows that external forces do not dictate internal stability. That self-worth is not dependent on others' approval or disapproval. And that real strength lies in refusing to be controlled by those who seek power through reaction. That silence is an act of defiance that many fail to recognize, a weapon that holds more strength than words because it denies the very thing that those who seek control desire the most: engagement. When someone expects a reaction, whether it be anger, justification, or defense, and instead is met with nothing but silence, they are forced to confront the reality that their words or actions hold no power. The moment they realize they cannot manipulate emotions, cannot provoke a response, and cannot draw someone into their game, the balance of control shifts. They are left standing in the emptiness of their own words, grasping for something that is no longer there. Silence is not passive. It is an active rejection of participation in the dynamics that others attempt to impose. It is a refusal to be pulled into unnecessary conflicts, a refusal to grant attention where it is undeserved, and a refusal to let someone else dictate the course of an interaction. It challenges the expectations of those who assume that they can provoke, manipulate, or demand a response. It strips them of their perceived influence, leaving them with nothing but their own unvalidated ego. The absence of reaction forces them to look inward, to sit in their discomfort, to question why their words failed to elicit the control they were seeking. When someone is met with silence, they begin to lose confidence in their ability to dominate a situation. They may push harder, testing limits, escalating their behavior in an attempt to provoke a reaction. But if silence remains, their efforts become futile, their power over the moment slipping through their fingers. The realization that they no longer hold control is one of the most frustrating experiences for someone who thrives on attention, dominance, or validation. Silence becomes the most effective way to dismantle their illusion of power, to make them confront the hollowness of their need for control. Those who seek to manipulate others often rely on their ability to elicit emotional responses. They know that anger fuels conflict, that defensiveness invites debate, that justification prolongs engagement. They rely on the fact that most people feel the need to explain themselves, to prove a point, to correct misunderstandings. But when none of these things are given, when words are withheld, and silence is the only response, they are robbed of the ability to continue their manipulation. They are left with nothing but their own words, forced to hear the emptiness of their own provocations. Silence does not mean weakness, nor does it mean agreement. It is, in fact, the strongest rejection of someone's attempts at control. It is the unspoken declaration that their words hold no weight, that their presence does not demand attention, that their influence is powerless. It is a statement that requires no explanation, no justification, no elaboration. It is a rejection that cannot be argued with, debated, or twisted. In its simplicity, it carries an undeniable strength, one that is impossible to combat with words alone. When someone chooses silence instead of reaction, they reclaim their power. They refuse to let someone else dictate their emotions, their thoughts, or their energy. They set an unbreakable boundary without the need for conflict, demonstrating that their peace is not something that can be disturbed at will. They communicate that not every battle is worth fighting, not every voice deserves an audience, and not every challenge requires participation. Silence is the ultimate act of defiance because it does not seek to fight back, yet it leaves the greatest impact. It allows the instigator to battle only themselves, to wrestle with the emptiness of an unanswered provocation, to sit with the discomfort of their own irrelevance. Silence takes away their control, their validation, their power, and leaves them with only the truth that without a reaction, they hold nothing at all. Indifference is a force that dismantles even the most inflated egos, stripping away their sense of significance by denying them the very thing they crave, recognition. An ego thrives on attention, whether through admiration or conflict, feeding on the reactions of others to sustain its sense of importance. The moment it is met with indifference, it begins to wither, deprived of the validation it desperately seeks. When someone who expects engagement is instead ignored, when their words or actions fail to elicit any response, they are left questioning their own relevance. Without attention, without acknowledgement, without a response to fuel their self-importance, the foundation of their ego begins to crack. People with inflated egos often believe that they command influence over those around them, that their presence alone demands recognition, whether through provocation, manipulation, or dominance. They seek ways to ensure that they remain at the center of attention. They expect reactions, whether of admiration or opposition, because both confirm their significance. If they can make someone love them, they feel powerful. If they can make someone hate them, they feel just as powerful. But if they can elicit nothing at all, if their presence is met with indifference, they are faced with a truth they cannot escape. Their perceived importance is an illusion. The sting of indifference is greater than that of outright rejection, because rejection at least acknowledges someone's presence. Even an argument, no matter how heated, still confirms that the person matters enough to warrant a response. But to be ignored, to be dismissed without engagement, is to be treated as though one does not exist. There is nothing more damaging to an ego than the realization that it holds no control over others, that it does not command attention, that it does not have the power it once believed it did. Indifference forces an inflated ego to confront its own fragility, to question the worth it once assumed was undeniable. When someone is indifferent, they remove themselves from the dynamic that feeds an ego's strength. They refuse to play into the cycle of validation, refuse to be provoked, refuse to offer the reaction that an ego-driven person expects. This lack of engagement sends a powerful message, one that says, "You do not matter enough for me to respond." This is not an act of cruelty, but rather an assertion of self-control, an understanding that not all battles are worth fighting, that not all people deserve the energy they demand. The ability to remain indifferent in the face of provocation is a sign of true power, a refusal to be controlled by the need to react. An inflated ego does not know how to handle indifference. It thrives on opposition, on praise, on any form of engagement that reinforces its existence. When it is denied all of these things, it spirals into frustration, desperation, and eventually self-doubt. The person behind the ego may try harder, escalating their behavior, pushing further to get a reaction, but when nothing comes, they are left with only themselves. This forced self-reflection is something they often avoid at all costs, as it exposes the emptiness beneath their self-importance. Indifference becomes a mirror reflecting the truth they have long ignored, that their power is not inherent, but borrowed from the reactions of others. Mastering indifference is not about being cold or heartless, but about recognizing that some interactions do not deserve attention. It is about choosing where to invest energy, understanding that not every challenge requires participation, that not every voice deserves an audience. It is about preserving one's peace, refusing to be drawn into unnecessary conflict, refusing to be manipulated into engagement. Indifference destroys an inflated ego because it removes its lifeline, depriving it of the fuel it needs to survive. Without a response to cling to, without validation to sustain it, an ego crumbles under the weight of its own insignificance, left to face the reality that without attention, it holds no power at all. When someone possesses real strength, they do not seek validation through confrontation, nor do they feel the need to assert themselves at every opportunity. They understand that responding to every insult, engaging with every challenge, and proving themselves to every critic is a waste of energy. They know that the most powerful individuals are those who can remain unaffected by the noise around them, who can observe without reacting, who can decide when and how to respond rather than allowing others to control their emotions. This level of restraint requires discipline, patience, and an unshakable sense of self-worth, qualities that those who lack true power often do not possess. Restraint shifts the balance of power in any interaction. When someone expects anger and is met with calmness, when they expect defensiveness and are met with silence, When they expect engagement and receive only indifference, they lose the ability to control the situation. Those who seek to provoke rely on the emotional responses of others to fuel their own sense of power. The moment they are denied this response, they are left without direction, without influence, without the validation they crave. Restraint strips them of their perceived control, forcing them to confront their own lack of true authority. Emotional discipline is a rare trait, one that sets apart those who are truly powerful from those who only appear to be. A person who can control their reactions holds an advantage over those who act on impulse. They are not swayed by temporary emotions, by the need to prove a point, by the desire to win an argument that ultimately holds no value. They do not allow others to dictate their mood, their thoughts, or their energy. Instead, they remain steady, unshaken, unbothered by the fleeting opinions or actions of those around them. This ability to remain composed in any situation is a form of quiet dominance, a power that does not need to be announced, but is felt by those who encounter it. Restraint does not mean passivity, nor does it mean tolerating disrespect or injustice. It means choosing battles wisely, knowing when to engage and when to walk away, understanding that true power is not in proving oneself to others, but in maintaining control over one's own emotions and actions. It is the realization that not everything requires a reaction, that silence can be more impactful than words, that stepping back can be a greater act of power than stepping forward. It is in this restraint that real authority is found, the kind that does not rely on external validation, but is rooted in an unshakable inner strength. Those who possess true power do not waste their energy on unnecessary conflicts. They do not allow their emotions to be controlled by others, nor do they seek to control the emotions of those around them. They move with purpose, speak with intention, act with wisdom. Their presence alone commands respect, not because they demand it, but because their restraint speaks louder than any words ever could. True power is not in the ability to overpower others, to dominate conversations, to win arguments. It is in the ability to remain unshaken, to choose when to act and when to remain still, to control oneself so completely that no external force can dictate one's peace.